Hey guys, Kasal here. You're about to watch Thorin talk and talk and talk. But it's kind of good, I swear.
This episode, like a lot on my channel, unsurprisingly, is brought to you by my endless enthusiasm, optimism, prolific nature. But you know what actually does help with that? I do take caffeine every day. It's one of the stimulants I enjoy. And my caffeine source of choice is, of course, Gamer Subs. Here's a lovely flavour. It's a classic as well. It's called Blue Raz. I think it's just called Blue on the website now. It's one of those ones that has a really strong flavour. This one is, I normally say they're not very chemically flavoured. This one's chemical, but in a good way. If you know the classic artificial flavour, Blue Raspberry, this tastes exactly like that. It's quite a strong flavour, so if you don't like that, I'd avoid it. Stick with somewhat chill like Incel Tears, Peaches and Cream, or Watermelon Ice, or just classic lemonade or something. They're the more pleasant ones, just the more ones that everyone could probably enjoy, and I doubt anyone will really dislike. This is a really strong, this is a Marmite one. You're either going to really love this, or you're not going to care for it whatsoever. So if you like that strong chemically flavour, like the Kool-Aid or sodas of your youth, I'd check this one out. You can obviously get everything 10% off on the GameStop store using the code Thorin, Thorin, at GameStop.gg. Now, I actually wanted to do separate videos for the playoffs of the Major because I did my one video just the pick'em one because I thought some people only care about the pick'em challenge. They just want to see that screen. They want to hear a brief reason why. They want to get your vibes and they want to see who you're like thinking will win, you want to win, all that jazz. But I thought for a preview, some people don't want a really long preview. It's why actually, spoiler, desks don't tend to actually be 30 minutes of pure analysis like Dota 2 or League of Legends. They tend to just be like 5 minutes long total in League or 10 minutes long, mixed with like highlight packages, graphics. And then actually, if you don't know, analysts sometimes get like 2 minutes each, 30 seconds each, depending on how big the event is. So instead, on YouTube, I have as much time as I want to go into the minutiae and what someone second vetoed 7 series ago or the last time they played or whatever. So then we're going to do it that way. But the way we're going to structure it is this. We're going to do each of the series. I'm going to go into the veto, etc. for the first 4, the quarterfinals or the round of 8. I actually think round of 8's a better name than quarterfinals. It's less confusing to people. There's just 8 teams left, so it's the round of 8 teams, and there's nobody skipping in this case. So in this particular case, the reason why I actually think I'll start with just some narratives, though, is I'm pretty sure people also want to know my reaction to the overall bracket, my bigger thoughts on the bracket, and then we'll dive into the minutiae of the matches themselves. So if you go over to the bracket, you will see, first things first, the classic immediate analytical lens is which half of the bracket is stronger. That's an easy one, isn't it? Because it's the bottom half. Just like in the previous major, remember the first one, PGL Copenhagen, we had that crazy top half of the bracket where it was Vitality Cloud9. So Vitality was obviously in theory like the second or first best team in the world, depending on who you thought was the best at the time. You had FaZe Clan against Spirit. At the time, FaZe was like the team in every final, and Spirit had just dominated, kind of eats it. So actually, everyone thought, well, the winner of the event is going to be either Vitality, Spirit, or FaZe. So everyone thought that half of the bracket will win, and therefore the classic, now aged poorly, comment was that semi-final, which ended up being Vitality against FaZe, not Vitality against Spirit, that's the real final. That wasn't, because actually the winner of the event wasn't from that. FaZe won that one. They upset Spirit, they upset Vitality, and then they actually lost to Na'Vi in the final. So I would say it's quite similar with this bottom half, because since Na'Vi's out, the two biggest favourites for the event, I think eye test wise, history wise, map pool wise, but all that is G2 and Vitality, and they're both on the bottom side. And then you've even put in there, FaZe is just like a team of veterans who are good on big stage matches and potentially give some excitement. So that's kind of like an interesting angle. And then Heroic, I actually think of all these other teams, right? The small ones, the minnows, are obviously Mongols, Liquid, and Heroic. I actually think on paper, Heroic should be the best of the 3. I actually think Liquid's roster just sort of underwhelms a bit. Mongols punch above their weight, but they are good. Their problem is they just haven't got the experience in big playoff series. Heroic has players that have been to major finals or been deep in majors or won big playoff games. So I actually think even that one's a trickier one. It's just obviously they're playing G2 who've got mega firepower. So first of all, bottom half of the bracket is stacked. The top half, any of these teams making the final is a surprise. Before this event, look, the least surprising is obviously Mouse or Spirit. But even so, before this major began, if I asked you, pick 2 teams to make the final, you're almost certainly going to pick G2 Vitality or G2 Na'Vi or Na'Vi Vitality. Now, maybe someone might say a Mouse. Maybe they could get on a heater. I don't think many people would pick Spirit, but they should be in the mix as well. Obviously, people imagine you'd have to have a lot of insane series from Donk. So I actually think the fact that, in theory, on paper, historically, not at this event, Mouse and Spirit would be the favourites in the top half of the bracket. Well, either of them making the final is a surprise, and I imagine they will be an underdog in the final, no matter who they play, unless they play a Heroic or FaZe, bizarrely. A la how Na'Vi, when they made it to the final, actually was thought to be a massive underdog to FaZe at the previous major, even though they ended up winning the tournament. So for me, the interesting part here is, Because the top half is weaker though, and as a result, the big dogs are weaker or have shown weakness in the last few months, it means that the underdogs in the top half, I actually think in theory, the underdogs in the bottom half, Heroic and FaZe, have a better chance to perform on stage, but they're also playing like the hottest / hardest hitting teams in the world. Mongols and Liquid are true underdogs, but because of their favourites have some weaknesses and have shown frailty themselves, they potentially have a chance to make the miracle run. It's more likely they make the Cinderella run. So if you look at it, like obviously everyone's riding Mongols, it's an Asian event and they have looked epic. Still, I've never seen them do any big playoff performances. All that great shit came in group stages, yes, over some of the best teams, including, by the way, in the last RMR here. But here's the thing I'll just say about Mongols. They never ever actually got into a position where massive pressure was applied. They were an underdog when they were playing BO1 against like G2. So not even supposed to win that one. No one's pressuring you to. I'd say, in theory, what would you be in the next match? Then there was the other one they played. What was that? Fury? No, Mouse. They played Mouse. You're underdog on paper there. Look, Heroic's probably, I know they were actually favoured against Heroic, I believe, in like odds or whatever. I think Heroic in theory should be better, but for right now, it's kind of a push. Heroic has more flaws. Mongols is strong in certain areas. That ended up being one that you could say that was almost like close to a 50-50. Even so, by the way, if you're going to go to the 3-0 game, the idea in the 3-0 game, you either were going to get Heroic or MIBR is crazy. Because obviously you'd look in, you'd think it'd be Na'Vi or G2 or Vitality. Somehow you didn't get any of them. You just ended up with Heroic. So it wasn't Vitality. So I think actually it was hard here, but those are also the BO1s. By the way, that's the most likely area for an underdog dark horse who's a rising team who hasn't done it on the big play. That's the most likely place to upset is in the BO1 where you get the map pool to the middle. Now, the BO3s, we didn't see them properly tested because Heroic is not Vitality, Na'Vi, G2. The best teams in the world, Spirit. They're not the ones that you're really scared of in the BO3. They actually match up well in BO3s, but they also lose a lot of BO3s in the third map. They have a hard time closing out because actually they're not insane firepower. They're just good in terms of all the role. So for me, the problem is Mongols haven't been actually like tested. They've been tested by the opposition. Look, obviously the first one, they walked on water there. They've been tested by having a really hard draw overall, one of the harder draws, especially for a team that went 3-0. But they were never in a match where they could be eliminated. Even in this one, yeah, they lost the opener, but then they won like the OT second one, and they actually were pretty confidently good on the third map. So I also just have never seen them put in the position where I have seen them break every other ton, which is if they ever get out of that group scenario. By the way, sometimes they don't even make the playoffs because they'll just do a couple of upsets and play really well and then just randomly lose that last match that gets you to the playoffs, or go to the playoffs and instantly lose. That's the problem so far for Mongols. Everything looks dope, but we have no experience of them actually getting it done in a playoff setting. And miss me with that. Yeah, but the crowd, and that could actually get in their own head. That could make them get scared, the fact that the crowd's going crazy. So Mongols against Mouse, everyone's going to cite that like, oh, Mouse on stage. And like, that's when they're playing the best teams in the world, guys. Like, that's when they're playing like Na'Vi on stage in a semi, or Vitality, or even G2 when Mongols was smurfing. And yeah, the Huxley lineup wasn't winning events or going to finals, but they were still like top 3, top 4. These aren't bomb teams. The problem is, I actually think Mongols, as a result of your Mouse, is just what the doctor ordered. That is a fucking genius straw for me. Now, why would I be nervous? In theory, they should be more nervous. And this isn't a team that I look at and say, we can't possibly beat them. Actually, every factor of your Mouse is like, this is cool. Yeah, Mouse hasn't been as hot very, very recently, like at this event, but actually they're still fine. They're still getting through the event. Then you go and you look down here. Liquid is actually somewhat locked out in their draw. If you imagine, like, these are the big favourite teams. I know actually Mongols was the highest seed there. But if you imagine in terms of who you don't want to draw, you don't want to draw if you're the Liquid. You don't want to draw Vitality, G2, Spirit, Mouse, right? These are the runs you're really scared of since there's no Na'Vi. Well, actually, of all those teams, the most beatable one probably is Spirit. And actually, if you're Liquid even, there's even some interesting veto. I think this is one of the only ones you'd have a chance against because we know Liquid, Spirit can themselves just be the donk show, just Donk and Shiro, or Zontix can disappear. They can have 3 players, can be bad. Well, I'll tell you what, we all know within Liquid, there's going to be games where Ultimate and Yekindar potentially struggle. So you're already now, JKS isn't a massive fragger, he's more of a clutch player and an impact player. Naf's pretty good, but he's not some massive like 1.25 rating type guy. Twist's even's fallen off the last month or so, people don't know. So actually, if you're the guys from Liquid, firepower's an issue, your map pool's not that great. So of all the teams you can draw, it's probably actually one of the better ones. Even so, I still think you're quite an underdog to win. So I actually think most likely upset. Look, on paper, it's Mongols Mouse because there's extra intangibles. I do think FaZe Vitality could be a great game. It's just you should expect Vitality to win that, probably in 3 maps, if not just win 2 and one's really close. G2 Heroic, look, Heroic has the map pool for it. The problem there is, can they actually play up to form? Can Nertz and Dexter actually match Nico and Monesi? If so, maybe there's a game to be had there. Look, the kicks and snacks angle's pretty cool. And then for Spirit, it's just about, is Liquid even able to get in the server with them? If they are, actually the map pools for Spirit somewhat flattened out a bit. It's not like any extreme strengths. It's just that it's gotten quite evenly decent across the board. It's mainly based on the opposition. So right now, I actually think there's a lot of angles where the only people you look at confidently is like G2 almost certainly should beat Heroic. Vitality almost certainly should beat FaZe. Even then, by the way, the semis, which now will be dubbed the real final, because obviously it's been like a banger matchup. These two teams not only are two of the best teams in the world and two of the strongest teams in terms of firepower and superstar players and all this stuff, but also it's one of the best matchups in Counter-Strike. When these two teams play, it is fucking dynamite. You also are never sure who's going to win, because it tends to be the stars decide it or some big player decides it. It tends to be on the third map, so should make for an amazing semi-finals potentially. Mongols against Mouse is a matchup that barely has ever happened. There was just that BO1 that already happened here. That was overtime on Mirage. Obviously, it's a very good map for Mongols. I don't care ever if it gets to that Mouse has a bad win rate. Like, they have an okay win rate now. They can always play this map. I even think the core, the key players in this team, just comfortable on this map. They just like it. So it's a bit like I always say about Big on Nuke. I don't care what the win rate is. In theory, there's always going to be an ability to play that game, and it will be harder than it looks like for a team that has a bad win rate. So I think that's an interesting angle. Obviously, you haven't played the best of 3, though, so that's an interesting factor there. Right, crucially for me, I went and did my deep dive for this one, and so here's some of the info we're going to get into now. So first things first, if we just go and compare the two teams, this might actually shock you, but because Mouse had that little slump in like 2 of the 3 last tournaments or whatever, and like the last month and a half or so, it means if you actually go to the last 3 months for these two teams, it might shock you, but the firepower edge is now on the side of Mongols, which is inconceivable. Because if you think about it, Mongols was the team where it just looked initially like the Senzu Shaw or 910 has a map he's good on, or Blitz is good, but you look at the squad and you go, it's all Mongolians, all young players, they should be that good. Meanwhile, Mouse, if you remember how CS2 began and how they were, I'd say until what, like at least until about 2.5 months ago, they were probably famous for having among the best firepower in the world, especially on aggregate. They don't have the true superstar Monesi type player, but actually you looked at it and they were the team where they could have 4 players, everyone except Shui could be like 1.1 or above. But you look in the last few months, unfortunately, Exertion's still very good, but even he's not massive numbers. Brolan had some tournaments that were dodgy, but he's actually still holding strong, just not as great in terms of killing. Yimpat's still doing well, but the rating's way down. Toshi, he's an up and down AWP. He's one of the most like hot and cold guys ever for me. So actually the firepower's not that crazy for these guys. Now look, they are a team that does actually spread it out the wealth a lot on the T side. Like yes, they make Exertion have a lot of the opening attempts, but they also get other people involved. Obviously fuck all for the AWP. Now here's what's going to blow your mind. Remember, Mongols isn't just playing just at RMR. They barely played any games there. They're playing all the real tournaments. This isn't like when the Brazilians come and they played like Bestia into Pain, into Imperial, into Bestia, and then Red Canadian. So, and it's like, oh, what the fuck? That's why your map pulls it. This is against real teams. Look at that. Compare that for a second. Look at that. The best is 1.10 there. That would be almost the 4th best player, and that's the IGL of Mongols. Mongols right now is on an absolute heater in terms of form. Senzu, I told people, if they actually next year get to enough playoffs, he will be a top 20 player. Probably could have been this year. Mazinho's the 17-year-old who's just come alive the last month or two. Before that, I thought he was a bit of a liability and did look a bit chalky. He's the sort of person you'd call a noob if you were Cadian, put it that way. 9-10 streaky, but look how he's playing so far. This is 39 maps in the last 3 months on LAN. Like, this guy's actually cooking as an AWPer. Bear in mind, he is a little bit streaky. Tell you what, he does position quite well. Blitz, I actually think is mad underrated. He's like the bigger Zera of Asia, where he's like not only a good IGL, then he also frags, and he can even like be the top fragger and the one fucking you up. I think that's legit as fuck. The Techno guy, I'm not as big a fan of, but whatever. By the way, that's totally fine in terms of numbers. He's doing his job. That means the whole team's actually got quite a high skill level. Believe it or not, right now, this would make you, for real, like a top 5 team in the world, firepower-wise. Like, it's not even a joke. You'd be better than like a FaZe Clan, a Team Liquid, a fucking, probably even Heroic, etc. etc. Like there's a whole, but I don't think it's only the absolute elite teams would beat you out. And even then, by the way, the Spirits of the world, they're not as good when you get down to the Zontics and the Magics, etc. So the baseline level, very impressive for this team. So that's actually an interesting detail I want to see, because in the playoffs, I would expect Mouse to be the stronger team individually, but obviously for this tournament, it would be the Mongols so far. I just expect that the stage might get to them in that sense. Then if we go and we look at the veto, that's where it gets interesting, especially because they've never played before. Because if you don't know, Mouse Sports, every single time vetoes Anubis. Well, that's actually a pretty decent map to veto against the Mongols, because not only is it quite a strong map for them, but that is a map that actually they will, on the odd occasion pick. So I actually think if it's available as a punish, it's not that they won't ever pick it. They're usually more playing it as a third map here or picked into them. Now, if you are the guys for the Mongols, you also have a permaban. You just ban Vertigo every time you can, unless someone else is a Vertigo banner, and then you ban Dust too. Now, being as Mouse isn't a Vertigo banner, you're just going to ban the Vertigo. And by the way, that also is correct, because as you see here, actually, Vertigo for Mouse doesn't have a great win rate, but if you go and look who they've actually played, it's not something you're worried about for your Mouse. Like, look, you lost to Cole twice. They are literally Vertigo punish pick merchants, and you beat them once in OT. So if anything, you even showed, even against a specialist team, you can get the win. Like, you got one loss against Astralis, who's still a new squad, and then you beat Fnatic Big. Like, you haven't played many squads. And I've seen in the past, actually, this is a team where push comes to shove. They can punish if they have to. They can, like, play this as a decider. So it's just an option if you're Mouse. Interestingly about Mouse, you can tell cynically that this team did have its slump, because they went from being a team that, with that strength of player and the map pool, actually I thought had the ability to move around the map pool and kind of play a bit of chess in the veto instead of just checkers and go for the obvious angle. I think they've tightened all that up and they've band-aided it, because they've gone way more to, like, we always ban this, we always pick this, it's always if this, it's always like a flow chart now, whereas before I really did think it was like looking at strengths, looking at things. I think now they just pick actually to give themselves the best chance and not go for any weird head angles. So I expect, bearing in mind Mongols is on a heater, Mouse, and they haven't played them, I think Mouse should just do a very conservative veto. So I think it's totally fine. You should probably just do the Anubis ban at this point in time. There'd be no reason not to. You don't play the map. Then they do the Vertigo ban. That's also totally fine. I think that's a totally legit map to take out. Like, obviously, you wouldn't want to gamble them picking it into it since you don't play it. The last thing you want to do in a major playoffs on stage is total rookies and 17-year-olds. By the way, the average age is like fucking 20 in Mongols. The last thing you want to do is pick into a map that would, or have someone pick into you as a punish, the map that you perma. That would be such a fucking stupid move. That's a way to just kill the whole series dead, second or first map. Then you go and you look at the picks, and the main picks for Mouse is overwhelmingly they pick Mirage if they can, Nuke as a backup, and they've picked an occasional Inferno. So you go and look at that. They have Mirage is what they like to pick. Mongols, by the way, certainly a good team on Mirage. You go and look, they have the Nuke. By the way, that would even slightly favour them, because look at the sample size, not just the win rate. That's a map that this team's always been pretty good on, in my opinion. It's even a map that actually somewhat works for Tosh, despite the fact he's an AWPer. And then Inferno, actually both teams pretty good on that one. So if you think about it, actually the maps that you're going to pick in general are maps that Mongols aren't scared of. So you're just picking whichever one you think's best for you. Maybe it's the Nuke in this case. Could be the Mirage. I think it's just a bit dangerous because Mongols are a team that tend to be picking that map. If you don't know, that's the most picked map for Mongols. But Mongols vary their pick a lot more. Mongols will go to Mirage. If Ancient's available, they're going to take it. By the way, that's obviously the one that I think you should take here. First of all, there's a world where, for real, Mouse might just say, for comfort, maybe we do pick Mirage. Look, if I'm them, I'd pick Inferno or Nuke. But let's say they say, fuck it, and we actually do decide to pick the Mirage. Well, in that case, if you're Mongols, you go ahead and you pick the Ancient. It's actually, eye test-wise, forget all these win rates, it's eye test-wise their best map. It's actually always been. When they started to rise up during this year and they were doing the upsets in play-ins and groups, this is where they start to get the results. This is where that style of, like, decisive timing attack T-style, I think, is the most effective, instead of the really slow build-up that everyone else does, and then the last second you just rush in on 30 seconds. They do it more based on, like, a snap read and a timing and some initial utility. So I actually think that would be a very good chance to have a chance to beat Mouse on it. You think of Mouse historically with some of these players, especially back in the Dext era, they obviously didn't mind playing the Itch, and that was a good map for them. Actually, this is one of the ones they've had to put to one side, because nowadays everyone has to play the Dust 2, the Mirage, the Inferno, the Nuke. They played the big maps, and then obviously they tend not to, they only have the Vertigo for punish reasons. They tend to stay away from what I consider the newer, shitter maps, although I do think Ancient is actually a good map out of the map pool now. So interestingly enough, I actually think if you're Mongols, you can get a pretty nice first 2 maps, but that's where it gets interesting for me. Because the second veto for Mouse is really varied. Like, they will veto like a Dust 2, an Inferno, an Ancient, a Vertigo. It just depends who the opponent is. So they are going to tailor their veto here to the guys from Mongols. So since I told you Mongols is going to pick like Mirage or Ancient, I actually think logically, if they pick Ancient, for example, to try and punish Mouse, then if I'm Mouse, even though certainly you like Mirage, that's not actually a map you tend to ever play as a decider. You tend to pick it because you think you're strong and the opponent's not strong, and then you don't play it as a decider. So I would actually say in that scenario, if you're the guys from Mouse, like, I don't know, you have to consider that one. Like, what are we going to do at that point in time? Now, I will say they don't second veto it, though. That's the most interesting thing. They don't tend to play it as a decider, but they also don't tend to second veto it. So that makes me think they're not used to picking the Mirage into people picking Mirage into them. So, oh no, sorry, it's the other way around. They either pick the Mirage or the people pick it into them. So I think the interesting thing for me is what you do as the second veto, because actually there's a lot that's shared there. And I think if you're Mongols, by the way, if you don't do the nuke pick, I think they're just going to veto nuke on the second one. So that means you would probably end up with a decider that could be an Inferno. It could even be Mirage, depending on what you did as your pick. Now, if you go to those maps, I am going to favour Mouse. In that world, both teams potentially get like, look, the one map that might be hard is Mongols might have a clear edge on Ancient. That's it, if they do the pick. But I actually do think if you're Mouse, you're only trying to win 2 out of 3 maps. I think you can get 2 comfort maps and you will have a good chance to win. So I am personally going to take Mouse to win this series, even though at the moment individual form maybe goes on the side of Mongols. It's just the difference is you might think Mouse choke in playoffs, not to the extent that Mongols do. So we'll wait and see on that one. Then we will do the Liquid against Spirit series. Now, this is actually a match that happened not that long ago, because you had it happen at Blast Fall. Now, I don't really care about this, as obviously the Cadian lineup, but you actually had it happen earlier in the season, and that was one of the ones that Liquid won. That was one of the ones that started to make people feel a bit shook about Spirit, actually, I think. And in that series, you had the classic vetoes. Liquid removes Vertigo, Spirit moves Inferno, Liquid picked a Dust 2, Spirit picked Nuke. By the way, Liquid is fucking terrible win rate on Dust 2. They have a 14% win rate, so that's crazy itself. Meanwhile, Spirit at the time was amazing on Nuke, but they've really gone away from that. Then Liquid removed an Ancient, Spirit removed the Mirage. By the way, Spirit's gone back to the Mirage now, if anything, that well's back. And then Anubis was left over, because this is really early on. This is back in September, so no one really understands at the time that in the same way Col have to be specialists on Vertigo, Liquid has to be specialists on Anubis. That's how they get to 3 maps against people. So I think what actually caught them here is this is one of the early wins. Look, first of all, you smash them on Dust 2, proving they're not good on it. Then they get a narrow win on Nuke, which, by the way, is mad, because I think Liquid's a really uncomfortable team on that map. Then you have this really close win on Anubis, because that was back when, I'm going to guess, the boy Ultimate was smurfing. He wasn't that insane on that map, but in general he was for the series. So, yeah, I think that's actually one that I don't expect the series. I think it's actually going to be a very different veto for both teams. So I think if you go and look at these 2 squads, like, first things first, we'll compare them as teams again. And spoiler, anyone who wants to talk shit on Spirit, listen, Spirit has way better firepower than fucking Team Liquid. You can just go and look here. So Spirit, unsurprisingly, has Donk with like mind-bending numbers for the last 3 months, over 42 maps as well. Shiro's still really good, especially Kill to Death. Like, people always underestimate. Yes, he's not like a top 3-4 player in the world, but if you make a top 10 players in the world list, he could easily get in the bottom part of that. He has more of a conservative game. He's really good at it, though. And you need people, him and Shiro and Zontix are relied on in this team to win clutches. Like, Donk's going to be dead, isn't he? Because he's just too good. He's too good early in the round. He's just going to keep taking fights. So I do think there's a tangible aspect that you need from these guys, whether they frag or not. Obviously, Zontix is the guy who has the issues. This is still good, by the way, for playing a bunch of tier 1 lands and going to playoffs, etc. His problem is, you forget about with Donk. He's a 17-year-old. He's a fucking rookie. Actually, not 17, is he? Let me have a look. No, he's 19. He's a 19-year-old rookie in his first ever year on LAN. So actually, he's somewhat holding up decent. He's just not as good as he was in the first season / at Katowice. He just smurfed a little bit too much at that event compared to what he did at the Major, for example. So firepower here, very top heavy, but it's really fucking good when you get the top heavy. And there's no overlap with these players. One's an aggressive rifler, one's an AWPer, a little bit more passive. It's even a great style to have. I don't think the IGL's that good. You go look on Liquid's side, the last few months have not been kind to them. You remember how good they were at the beginning when they first made this line? Like, Twist was putting up big numbers. NAF was still your really solid 1.1 player. Ultimate was having Smurf tournaments where in group stages he was one of the highest rated. JKS is winning clutches. Your Kindar's shit, right? Everything's changed. Like, NAF actually is technically your highest rated player, but he's not even doing that great himself. He's just playing like, you know, well for NAF, nothing insane. Twist has dropped off loads. Remember, he's calling now when he's getting in at tough times. He's playing a million Dust 2s. He's just losing every fucking day of his life. They can't close a Mirage game out. On Nuke, they look uncomfortable. Like, this is it. Basically, it was only the Anubis Joker angle they had for a while, and that's gone away the last few months. Ultimate was really good the first couple of months. Didn't have to play playoff games. Once playoffs came, people started studying, but he couldn't just be super aggressive posting up CT set. He saw his numbers fall off a bit. He's still good, by the way. There is some talent there. I don't think he's outrageously talented personally. I don't see him as some mega player like in the future. Oh my God, you got to watch this guy. But he is good. He's like decent. He's not bad on this team. He does his job generally. He's just not an elite AWPer for me. So I want to see where that shakes out. By the way, he's getting a whole season. We'll see at the rate of how Liquid's gone, by the way. Maybe because they made top 8, they'll even keep him the next few months of the year. I'll say at the end of next season, you'll know for sure if he's ever actually going to be a really good player. Because look, Liquid should have only really good players in theory. But for now, beggars can't be choosers. Think of the dog shit lineup they had before. In terms of in the server, JKS still wins the clutch. He's just never a big fragger. And he's not even trying to be in the G2/Team Liquid era. Yakindar's actually played a little bit better, even if his fragging's still fairly shit. Even if he still does look like he's absolutely reamed out and has no mental confidence in himself. So the firepower disparity actually fairly big. Because we're talking shit on Zontix, and spoiler, Zontix would be the fucking second best player in Team Liquid. So how do you like them apples? And the difference is Donk always shows up. Always. So you go and look at this series. Team Spirit, 100% of the time, vetoes Inferno. Inferno's actually not a bad map for Liquid. It's got a lot of fucking play here. That's really dodgy. In fact, do you want to get even more bombed out? That's actually a map that sometimes Liquid will pick. It's not the most picked map. They try to get the Anubis, obviously, but that's a map they will pick. So already you're taking out one of the maps that you like to pick in this scenario. Then you go and look, if you are the guys from Liquid, you obviously always ban Vertigo, right? Right. In theory, Spirit's actually, when they've had to, because it was their famously like their 5th or 6th map, they were actually trying to like play it recently. They've been forced to play it, and actually they're not terrible on it. Like if you look, when they played it these 3 times, they beat NIP close, Sashi, they lost to Astralis. Like they're not great on it, but they're willing to at least clearly play it and practice it. So if you go and you look, I actually think taking out Vertigo, it's not like you're taking anything massive away from Spirit, but okay, that's going to happen. Those 2 permas are going to come in. It's pretty obvious. If you're the TL pick, you only do the other one when it's the 2 Vertigo pickers and you know they won't pick it, etc. And you can float and do another one, or they go first and then they pick it away as the veto. Then when it comes to map picks, though, that's when it gets interesting. Because Team Spirit and Liquid, you won't believe this, are actually both Anubis pickers at the moment. They're both picking Anubis when the angle is there. Well, that means both teams should like whichever one of you picks Anubis, or you'll end up with Anubis as the decider. Like, there's actually been a whole bunch of scenarios where they also have had the Anubis decider come through. So I actually think the question is, does someone pick Anubis, or do they, like, gentleman's handshake it to a 3rd map, and that's the decider? Because other than that, if you are the guys from Spirit, I told you they went away from the nuke. If not Anubis, you pick Dust 2. Right now, by the way, Dust 2, dynamite map to pick against Liquid. They just bleed out of their arses on that fucking map. Like, and they're not even getting double digits, boys. The only team they beat was fucking VP. VP's terrible, and that was ages ago. They lose to everyone. Now look, there's a lot of good teams in here too, but they lose to everyone on this map. They just get their shit fucking clapped, including 13-3 by Spirit months ago at that blast. By the way, when actually in theory, Liquid was having some of their players were playing well. That was when actually they were still good in theory. So Dust 2, scary as fuck. And if you're Spirit, why wouldn't you pick it? It's your most played map up there with Mirage. Why wouldn't you just pick it at this point in time? You take out their Inferno, you pick the Dust 2, very likely chance that's 1-0 up for you. Now, if you're Team Liquid, your go-to pick is Anubis. If not, you do, believe it or not, Dust 2 you sometimes do, or you'll do a Mirage or Inferno. You're pretty even if you can't get the Anubis. Now, you should probably pick the Anubis. Like, classically, it is the map you like. It's a good one, right? If you go and look here, you have gotten the wins. You've even got the wins recently. Then you're beating teams. I think Vitality's really good on that map. You've beaten them twice and lost an OT to them. This is a must pick. And if you go and look on the Spirit side, yeah, this is a map that they're picking. They're trying to play more, but look who they're playing it against. They're beating FaZe on it. They're losing a G2 every time. They beat Vitality. You know, that's a pretty legit result. I give them that. That is a problem. That's Vitality with Jax. So that's an issue to consider. They lost to Liquid themselves on it because it's a specialist map for them. Like, you can play it if you're Spirit, but it's certainly a weakness. By the way, that would be an excellent chance that Team Liquid can frag out to be 1-1 in the series. So if we're 1-1 in the series, where are we going on the decider? Well, as a second veto, actually Spirit, amazingly, this just shows how much their map pool's changed over the year. Their go-to home map was Nuke. I thought they were the best Nuke map in the world. And they were the best Nuke team in the world in the first season. It's their most second vetoed map, believe it or not. But I said this earlier, Liquid has never looked comfortable on that map, and they have a really hard time closing games. Them and Collar just shit on Nuke for some reason. And by the way, a spoiler, that is one of their most second vetoed maps. Mirage is the highest, but Nuke is after that. Now, here's what's interesting. Already, Liquid's in a really tough spot for the last map. Because if they veto out the Mirage, which, by the way, has become, again, one of the go-tos in terms of, like, win rates getting up there again for Spirit, then you're probably in a tough spot there. But at the same time, do you want to go into their Nuke? They haven't played it as much. There's not as much data to go off, but you're pretty bad on it. I think either way, you've got a Sophie's choice there if you're Liquid. If those are the sorts of maps you're choosing between, you're going to be in a tough spot. Like, you're probably going to have to play a third map that's going to favour Spirit. So I think 2 out of 3 maps should favour Spirit. And I'll tell you what, I don't even know how much Liquid will turn up on the Anubis when it's there. So I've got to say, this is looking like Spirit win. Obviously, we'll check out all the rest of it. You're thinking Spirit wins the series. And the question just is, does Liquid get the 3 maps for me? If they can get to a third map, which on paper, if they're good, they should be able to, they can make it interesting. But I'm still going to have to take Spirit to win this one. And if you go and look in terms of deciders, Spirit's played loads of Dust 2. They played loads of Nuke deciders. Neither of these are maps that you want if you're Liquid. If you go down, they've actually themselves played a bunch of Nuke deciders. They've had Anubis as the decider. So the other question, obviously, is if Liquid does it instead and it ends up as an Anubis. I don't think you can end up with that. Actually, no, I'm just going to take it, right? So for that one, as I showed in my pick'em, I have it as I think it will be Mouse against Spirit in the semis. Then if we go to G2 against Heroic, I've actually realised I forgot to show you some of this part here. So first of all, Spirit's actually fragging very, very well for the tournament, but that's our part because Donk's just smurfing on the whole thing. Meanwhile, Liquid is actually overperforming generally. You wouldn't normally see them have that sort of a rating, but then you go look at some of their players. It's mainly because Naf's just playing insane. Ultimate's having actually a pretty good performance. You go to, then it's your Kindad. What's concerning is where's Twists? Where's Twists? Where's Twists? That's what's worrying. JKS can be there, Twists can't be there. This is, in theory, the most important player on the team. And he's all the way down there. So that's actually, as much as the Kindle one's good, obviously the Ultimate one's really nice news, but you just can't expect it to necessarily continue. It's hard to have a lot of confidence. Meanwhile, can Donk do that? He actually has shown he can. You go down. Can Shiro do that? Absolutely he can. Zontic's playing a little bit better maybe than you expect, but that's what you want if you're Spirit. You go further down. Amazingly, Chopper's doing even decently. Magix is doing badly, hence a lot of people want him kicked, but where was Magix? He's just around Chopper's level, basically. So, if I go and just quickly look for the G2 Heroic series, like I told you, I actually think role-wise and map pool-wise, Heroic can make this interesting. The problem is going to be firepower and Dexter. Like, Monesi is obviously the superior opposite. If you go to here, G2 unsurprisingly has bonkers firepower. Now, maybe they've overperformed a little bit, as in the league or down a bit, but they're a team that is capable of doing this. They have some of the most firepower in the world. So you go and look at them. Meanwhile, Heroic, that's actually just sort of like a good one. It's nothing crazy. That's plausible. 11 maps played as well, so pretty big sample size. Obviously, G2 only played 5. You go and you look here. Monesi's doing insane like you'd expect. Nico's doing really well. If that continues, you're going to have a really hard time, understandably. You go down. Nertz is doing awesome. That is a mega sign. You want Nertz to be your best player. It's even a good sign that Dexter's doing quite well because the fragging is good, even if the rating isn't so crazy. They played a lot of maps, remember? The issue then becomes, Kixan is doing well. Normally you think he won't do, but where the fuck... Shush was doing bad the last month or so after Rio, basically. But I have to say, Tessus is the one I'm scared about. Because Tessus is the guy, I've always thought he's a really good role player and entry player, but man alive does he just play big playoff games. So I'm scared about that a little bit. And then Shush, for me, he's not supposed to be a big fragger, but he's supposed to be smart and add like a component to my team. So Dexter and Tessus are the ones I'm a little bit scared about. I'm also not the biggest kicks and calling style, but if the rest of the players play, it's all good. So for me, I already worry about the firepower angle. Can you even get there? And if you don't know, we'll do the usual classic angle. We'll just go and look at the firepower. So let me just choose this over. it's actually not going to be, for the last 3 months, as crazy as you think. You're actually going to be shocked when I show you this. You're going to think, oh, it must be like G2 just dusting them off. Like, no chance for Heroic, man. There's no way they're in with a firepower. Watch this. Now, true, Heroic did play the S4 tournament, so they got a few easy wins there and a few lesser squads. But they also played the Rio and some of the Blasts, etc. Like, let's go and have a look. And generally like ESL tournaments. So if you go and look here, it's not that crazy, is it, the difference? Like, believe it or not, Nerds and Monarchy are comparable. Tesses is 1.09. The Dexter's like, all right, though. He's just not where you want him to be for a star ARPA. Shush is okay because he averaged out over the 3 months. Kixon for an IGL's fine. You go look over here. Snack's actually pretty shit. He blows a fuck ton of rounds, by the way. Hunter's actually pretty sus as well. You just think of him winning big clutch, so having the one map he does well on. Malbs really, by the way, has actually normalised in a way massively so that a lot you didn't talk about. You know that whole thing of like, haha, so much for rolls. When you limit his CT side like you have on this team, what you are going to get, like this, 1.05 as his CT, is, look how good he is on T side. If you didn't have him in those roles on CT side, he would be a better player. That's why when he gets Nico's roles next year, it'll make sense. But even Nico's not doing as crazy. That's why when Kassad constantly tries to tell me Nico's better than Donk, or Nico's in that group with Donk, Ziwu, and Monster, is he fuck, mate? Like, look, eye test wise, when he plays awesome, he is. He's a really smart player still, and mega clutch and all that jazz. But actually, he hasn't been as crazy as he was at the beginning of this season. The first couple of months of this season, he looked like the best player in the world. The last few months, he sort of cooled off a little bit. It's more in the big games you're thinking of. So actually, the firepower differential, not as crazy as you're thinking, right? Obviously, Nico can be the determining factor. But so could a Dexter overperformance, right? So I think people are probably already shocked that you can match the firepower somewhat over the last 3 months on LAN. Then if we go down to the veto, right, obviously G2 doesn't ever play Vertigo, right? But here's the key thing. They also get to actually not have to ban it sometimes because they play against some of the other teams. They play a TL and then they can go, fuck it, we do the Anubis ban. They play a Na'Vi. Na'Vi's going to ban the Vertigo, so they do the Mirage ban. They can fuck around with it. The problem is you're going to have to ban it against Heroic because Heroic absolutely are a punish pick team on this map. Like, Heroic are a team that has... They don't actually have to pick it very often. They're not doing that, but they can. If you leave it up, obviously most teams if you don't know, most elite teams ban Vertigo at the moment. It's the main perma-ban. So it's one of those scenarios where G2's going to ban it anyway. It's not the one you pick, but you're really good on it. So at that point, they just have to ban it. They can't float it. That's good. G2 gets to float against people like Na'Vi and some of the other big teams out there. So it's actually key that you actually make them honour the perma-ban. Not everyone has to do that. And if you play against their firepower and you don't honour the perma-ban, then you're going to be in big trouble. So for me, then when it comes to the side of Heroic, they always ban Inferno, or if you ban it, they ban Anubis themselves. So by the way, neither team really wants the Anubis necessarily. Taking out Inferno against G2, I think, like, spiritually, a bunch of the G2 players do like Inferno, but I actually think there's not that many teams that have it as a specialist map, you'll notice at the moment. It's actually further back in their map pool. So it's okay to remove it. You're removing it anyway because you don't ever play it in Heroic. That's all good. Then when it comes to the maps you're going to pick, now it gets interesting. Because actually G2 varies their map pick quite a lot. They will pick Mirage and Inferno mainly. They're really good on Mirage. Inferno, you're not going to think they're that great on, but they'll pick it. Obviously, there's teams you can punish pick it. They're not going to get the Inferno here. So will they consider a Mirage pick? Spoiler, Mirage probably the best Heroic map. And, are you ready? Mirage is the most picked map by Heroic. So if you're a G2, the actual smart angle here, because I don't think Heroic are the team that are going to fuck with the veto. I think if you're Heroic, you actually on some level have to try and play to your strengths. If you're going to potentially pick this map, obviously it depends. Maybe you're going to get cheeky down here. Let's see. It's hard to pick an ancient, but you can see what you do. If you're going to pick it, G2 can say, well, we'll just have you pick it and then we'll be the ones that pick our roadmap. Maybe we pick the Dust 2, pick the Nuke, etc. The other maps that you tend to pick if you're Heroic, Dust 2's up there as well. Then it's just specialist maps. So it's Mirage or Dust 2. By the way, if you're G2, you're loving one of those picks. You want them to pick into their comfort and then just give you a free chance to win on a Dust 2 or Mirage just by fragging out. Just T-side, just shoot people in the head, Malbs will go kill, etc. If you're Heroic, if this was a Carrigan team, he would just exploit this part. He would just be playing all day on the angles of, like, you're not going to know what map I'm picking and vetoing, and I'm going to go into areas you don't expect and I don't normally do. If you're G2, I actually think, bearing in mind you pick the Mirage or the Inferno, and Inferno's going to be gone, you could also just say, I'll pick the Mirage and hope they pick Dust 2. Yeah, that also, by the way, give them a chance to 2-0, but their firepower is going to be the issue, right? Can it live up to the stage of a fucking major? That's the problem, right? It's been years since Dexter played a big stage major like this. In OG, he was trapped in the Swiss system. It's all the way back at what? Like, it's probably back at, no, I think they made the, oh no, it was Wonderful who was on the Spirit that was at Rio. It was all the way back at Antwerp then that he was in this position. Meanwhile, G2's players, they're used to being here, with the exception of Malbs. That's the other factor. I want to see how Malbs plays. Everyone's just giving him the status like he did at the Blasts. I don't know how he'll do in the major playoffs. That could get to you. Let's see. You also could do the just 2 pick, by the way, if you're G2. So essentially, you can go where you want. You can just pick the comfort you want. You've done the odd Anubis one, but that was more just to punish. If you're Heroic, you do sometimes, you have done punish picks yourself. You've done an Ancient pick, an Anubis pick, a Nuke pick. Now look, an Ancient pick on paper, mathematically, is the right pick to do. The problem is, think of G2, and you think of when they win tournaments, and man, they can be scary on Ancient. I don't care that the win rate's down there. They can scare you. Let's go look who's actually beaten them on this map. They lost in very close fashion to 3D Max. They amazingly got 13-0'd by Liquid, which is inexplicable. And they lost to Na'Vi twice. I don't even think this is actually that bad. It's certainly not as bad as it looks at 42% win rate or whatever. That's not that bad. That's not that bad. Meanwhile, Heroic, 71% win rate. Let's go look. Lost to Spirit, lost to Mongols, lost to Passion, lost to Big. What map is this? An Ancient. Who are they beaten on this? By the way, Mongols is a really good Ancient team. There's no diss there. I mean, these are some good teams to win over. The Na'Vi. Okay, not too bad. You have to honour that. So then we go for a second veto. And here's what's interesting. Second veto, the most second vetoed maps in this order are Anubis, Nuke, and then Inferno, if you're G2. So Anubis, Nuke, Inferno. Now, Anubis, by the way, probably should be the one you consider here, because Inferno's going to be gone. Obviously, you want to force a Nuke decider if you can. Now, here's the good news, is I actually don't think it's impossible you could get the Nuke, but the problem is Heroic does actually, on the second veto, go all over the place in their veto. They'll take out Ancient, Anubis, Mirage, Nuke. They go wherever they want on that one. So I actually feel like, in theory, they wouldn't give you that. Like, to me, logically, I think this is actually where, if you're Heroic, you could say, if the maps are between Nuke and Ancient, surely they would just opt into Ancient. That's interesting, actually, because that gives them a chance, I've got to say. The problem they're going to have is this. This is what's unusual. Because Heroic has a legit map pool and real roles, I think the series goes like this. I think Heroic could do an upset, but it'd have to be 2-1. And I think that G2 is heavily favoured to 2-0, but if it goes to a decider, actually there's a world in the veto where, just because of how they zig and zag and they have to honour the perma of Vertigo, they could actually end up with the decider being the trickiest map of the series for them. It might not be as even a map otherwise, whereas it might be the first two of their chance to just blow them out the server. So then the question becomes, I think G2 plays quite a lot of 3-map series actually. Will they be a slow starter? Will they maintain momentum? Can they have all those players frag out at once? Normally having 3 maps gives you a lot of time to breathe. If they can play 3 maps they like, I take G2 all day long. This is an interesting Heroic angle though, I've got to say. This makes me actually think it's plausible. So I'll say G2's going to win, they're the better team. Right, for the last match is obviously Vitality against FaZe Clan. The real question here is this. Does FaZe have some shenanigans planned for this veto? Because Karrigan obviously loves to throw the opponent off. I've always said, I think one of the greatest intangible aspects to Karrigan's game is that not only in the veto will he like gamble on like a crazy punish that you don't know exists. That's genius, by the way. Remember that famous saying? Like, talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a talent no one else even knows exists. The genius of Karrigan is this. He will not only find a hole in the veto that you don't think he will exploit, because potentially he has to gamble on a weaker map, like the float of the Vertigo, or sometimes when he's picked into strange maps in the past, but also he loves, even on his pick, if he has the map pool, to just vary to like a second or third favourite pick. So it's just less likely that you actually did good prep for the map he's picking. He doesn't want it to be obvious what he's going to pick and you just go and watch the last 10 demos and then come with all your antis and all your calls. He wants you to waste your time on a map or two, turn up, and then with any luck after the veto go, oh, fucking throw that out then, and all the prep was nothing for his map. That's an angle. He prefers that over, it's the map that we want, it's the comfort. Like I'm saying, Liquid Heroic, they should probably go for comfort with their picks. That's not what FaZe tend to do. But that's when FaZe is really good, because crucially, he had the players in Mega FaZe lineups to do that. Or he did it when he was a pure underdog. So now what's interesting is I think actually another quality of Carrigan is he knows when he's outmatched and won't just win straight up. So the problem here is this. The comfort level for FaZe right now is not good for their players. A bunch of their key players are not playing well in the last few months. And so as a result, you really have your concerns. Like they probably should play to comfort right now and just pray somehow Vitality doesn't come shooting 10 out of 10 level firepower. And that just comfort lets you win some clutches and some mid-rounds and make some because if you go with the classic FaZe veto, it's a massive gamble, and unfortunately your players might not be capable of winning on those maps or in that kind of scenario that's going to be comfortable for you as well, because you can't know on a veto like that 100% that you're always going to get it in there. They can do a response like Spirit famously did at the last major, where they called the bluff and let it go to vertigo, and that almost cost FaZe Clan, because that was a bluff you wanted to win and then not have called. That's why the bluff was so powerful. So if you go and look at these two teams, I don't think I need to tell anyone, it's going to be a really unsurprising detail that obviously you are going to see a firepower disparity to the side of Vitality. But I think beyond Zewu, you might actually be surprised. You might actually be surprised that it's not as crazy as you're going to imagine. Obviously, Zewu is night and day above any player on FaZe. Even if, like, Rosen's the highest rated, eye test-wise, he's not the player that Zewu is. Just have it close to the impact. So, crucially, last 3 months on LAN, right, Zewu is obviously unfucking believable. Like, this number is blows your mind for 43 maps. That's impossible. This is some, like, GOAT level shit. Then you have Spinks, still really good. He's just not Nico or fucking Donk. He's more like in the exertion category. He's just really good. Obviously, different style of player. Flame's actually, considering, this is why you know people just are biased to aggressive players. Flame actually is not at the level you all talk like he is. And funny, everyone tells me Spinks is the one who's not the top 10 player. It's Flames who isn't, if anything. He's mad streaky. I mean, he's actually appropriately named. He's like a fucking lighter flame that can just go out any second or burn the house down. So you go, Mezzi, by the way, actually underrated. Actually a fucking pretty good sort of supportive piece, isn't he? By the way, they let him go. I hope some other good top team picks him up. If I'm G2, so we take him immediately if he's available, mate. Fuck these guys. So, obviously, he didn't play all the same maps. He missed 10 maps because of fucking the Jax angle at the Blast because he was having a kid. Actually, underrated. Apex, look, you don't expect big fragging out of him. You just expect, like, an odd halfway goes crazy on T-side, like a throwback game. And he just has to call well for these guys. And in general, I think he does. You go look on FaZe's side, their problem is no superstar. Like, Ro8 actually is normalised. Not only his rating is up here, but this is the key thing. He's back to being a really good player, but he's not at the level of the true superstars who carry the game. Whereas last year, he was right on that border. I think this year it's been people like Exertion who were on that border, most of the time Shiro maybe. It was actually Ro8. Ro8 was behind the big pack of the Nikos and the fucking Monacies and the Zewus of the world who were the best players. He was right behind them. Problem is, Frozen's good, but his impact isn't bonkers. And then this is where it gets sad. Brokey has fallen off a cliff. Absolutely. He was probably their best player most of the year. Absolutely terrible right now. And that means the AWP isn't relevant in the game. And you have no idea when he's going to do those silly moves. And those silly moves that are genius when they work, like JW, well, remember how it went in the latter years of JW, it became sad. In those eras when the Olaf Dennis lineup was falling off, they eventually banned him from using certain weapons if you don't. He used like Mag 10 and fucking Mag 7 and shit like that and play like drop down on fucking connector because he was just a liability. It's starting to get so that if you can't trust Brokey. Rain's actually smurfed at this major, but overall he's not a top player anymore. He's just a veteran piece. And Carrigan obviously frags like shit, but is an amazing caller. Now in this team, he's had a bit of a hard time. He's got a lot of baiting, and then his aggro player is a person who's just inting all the time and doing mistakes and dying. And then his like veteran, I let him do what he wants. Entry player isn't elite. He's just at the end of his career, and he's still very good for his age, but not compared to the rest of the player base. He's just a good or above average player. So actually, firepower isn't as much of a differential, but obviously this is the guy that changed the whole thing. So the first question is, does Zewu turn up? If Zewu turns up, it should absolutely be a Vitality. Probably a 2-0. Probably 2-0. That's just fair. So if we go and look at what they play, they've obviously played a billion times as well, but these teams seem to always meet. So they played at Cologne. That was a great series. They played actually already at this tournament. If you go, this was in the 2-0 game. So if we go look at the veto, FaZe removed the vertigo that time. They have to honour it. Vitality removed the ancient. Now, if I go to here, let me just check something a second. That's because Vitality always removes ancient. Now, let me look at this one here. which isn't even like a god tier map for FaZe, but I guess you have to remove it. Both teams remove the Vertigo. Vitality's confident they will. If you don't know, by the way, the other reason you have to remove Vertigo now is this isn't the team to fuck with. If you tried to float that, they might even pick it and they'll beat you on it. And if you dared to punish pick it, they will fucking slap you down. I'm telling you right now. Like, I think Vitality's like a sleeper, really good team on the map. They just choose not to go into it, because why would you? If you've got these formats, why waste your time on this map? Why bother? You got these already. And by the way, your Anubis a few months ago wasn't even bad. This win rate just looks bad because you played TL a billion times and Na'Vi, etc. and Eternal Fight. These are all the fucking teams on Anubis. So they're actually a team that's really strong, in my opinion, on 5 maps, comfort-wise. And then they take out the Vertigo. And in this case, FaZe is going to take it out for them. So you just take out the Ancient easy. Now this series takes place on maps we like. So then the question if you FaZe is, what do you do? Because it doesn't fucking matter. And you have to, I think, unfortunately, you pretty much have to do it. When FaZe doesn't do the Vertigo ban, when they play teams that don't play Vertigo, they do Anubis as their own ban. Look, I don't think actually that would be the pick of the guys from Vitality, but I also don't think you can just go with the ban there. It wouldn't even do much for you at that point in time. Then if you go to the picks, that's where it gets interesting, because obviously they're not memeing about it. The French fucking love Dust too. They will go to that anytime they can. It's not a map that FaZe dislikes, by the way. In fact, you look recently, who have they actually lost to on this one? Close game to Vitality, they lost. Big win by Mouse, but the Mouse is a top team. They lost to Furia, G2, Complexity. There's a mixed bag. There's some good wins in there. There's some bad losses. The problem is, theoretically, Vitality's probably the best Dust 2 team in the world. Especially if Zebu turns up, they're very hard to beat on that map. And you look, last time they played, it was just a pick. Meanwhile, FaZe ended up having a pick into a Mirage, which has been a map they've been focusing on way more recently. And remember, Vitality were the team that snapped the 12-game winning streak of Na'Vi. And just look at who they've beaten on this map. So, let's see. They lost to G2, but that was when they had Jax. They lost to Spirit, but that was with Jax, and still close. They beat Mouse, who was good on it. They beat Mouse with the real lineup. They lost to Heroic, but that's like one of Heroic's best maps. And they lost to G2 in that game where Nico was doing all that insane shit. And I think even Malbus was popping off in that one. So way better than it looks. Way better than the 63%. They're more like an 80% win rate team on that map for me. So if I look where else they were, then it went to Vitality removed Inferno, FaZe removed Anubis, and it ended up on Nuke, which has always been a map that Vitality's felt comfortable on and is a fabulous map for them right now, and it's always a good Zebu map. Now look, historically, FaZe's call like that map too. I think it's a map traditionally. Carrigan sort of likes the decisive fast calls on T-side. I don't think they hate playing that map, but as a decider, that could be a bit tricky. Like when I go down to here, it's the map that actually FaZe Clan plays the most as a decider. Dust 2 or Nuke are the ones they play, and those are two maps that you want if you're Vitality. Vitality tends to play Nuke or Mirage as their decider. Remember, it might even be a Mirage pick from the guys from FaZe Clan. The other angle is FaZe Clan's most picked map is Inferno. They could try that. Let's see who Vitality's played on that recently. They lost to Mouse. They beat Mongols in OT. They're 13-0 to Strauss, but lost to Eternal Fire in close fashion. Yeah, it's a bit up and down. It's a bit up and down. But the problem is, you didn't do that last time you played. See, he picked Mirage last time. And he got smashed, which the smashing part might make you consider the Inferno pick because Vitality moved it second. So if we imagine FaZe picks Inferno, that's a little bit sus. It's not that bad though. I think that should be the switch up. I think illogically you should switch up. Then again, the question is, do you think if you're Carrigan, well, they'll expect me to switch up? So actually, I'll just stick with the Mirage. I'll just go back to that again. That's an interesting angle for me. And look, I won't rule it out. But if Carrigan actually goes and picks Anubis and somehow he's prepped some god-tier antis, then he really just is fucking built different and he is an IGL. Like that would be, again, the target nobody can see. And if you're Vitality, that's actually one you think, that's safe, I can leave that there. But that's essentially the flank if it turns out he's got something secret on it. But I would expect he's just going to pick into something standard, like the Mirage, like the Inferno, which, look, give you a chance, but it's going to need your players to play way better than they have at this major. So probably Vitality's going to win your map pick. Probably they're going to win their map, pick it to just 2, or it could even be a Nuke. The decider, unfortunately, is probably going to be something like a Nuke. I don't know how you win this if you FaZe. This is Vitality all day long. And they beat you anyway when they play you previously. I'll just quickly show you, actually, the teams here. Unsurprisingly, Vitality is forking smurfing. Now, that shouldn't continue. A lot of that Zebu being in God mode, obviously. And they only played 4 maps. But I'll tell you what, FaZe is not where you want them to be, are they? They're not the team that you go, hey, that's awesome, that's really great. By the way, one thing I just realised I forgot to mention is technically Mongols, despite the fact that they got really lucky in the first Swiss, have actually had an incredibly hard draw. Because look, they had a really hard draw here, except for the 2-0 game. And then in theory, remember, they went 3-0. So when you go 3-0, you always get a 3-2 team. Look who the 3-2 teams are. They could have had Heroic, who's just like, this squad just doesn't make it that deep in the big tournaments, like majors. FaZe Clan's a bit dodgy, but they're mega veterans. And Mouse, in theory, of those three is the strongest. That's the one in theory you should be the most worried about right now. They actually got them. Now look, in the semis, they could get Spirit, which could in theory be easier, because that could in theory have been like a Na'Vi, a Vitality, a G2. So maybe it's harder from the... it's a little bit easier in the semis than it could be. But bro, you have to get to the semis before it gets easier for you. Like that's hard sledding right there. They say no man is an island. We all need people who've got our back. And supporting me and the content on my channel are the following people: Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, The Concept, Animosity, Banediesel, Ben Glass, Jasun, Jensen Goh, Tosh, Toucan, and you know it. Always a special thanks goes up to my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where I talk about whatever topics are on your mind? Do you want teasers, find out who the upcoming guests are, or maybe even to suggest a guest or a topic for my content? If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? In the Patreon link in the description box below.